All right, y'all. Welcome to another episode of Real Physician Reacts. I am yours truly, Dr. Pierre, your favorite board certified internist. If this is your first time catching this series, this is when I give my typically weekly, point of view, personal thoughts on things that kind of come across, my social media platforms, whether it be on my Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, whatever, right? I usually try to get my thoughts, especially from a physician's point of view. And I thought that this discussion this week was extremely pertinent, right? Depending on when you're watching this, we're about a couple days removed from a mass shooting that occurred in the state of Texas at an elementary school where a total of looks like 21 lives were taken. And this follows probably roughly 2 weeks after 10 lives were taken while shopping in a grocery store. Again, mass shooting, again, mass killing, again, assault rifles, right? And today's discussion really isn't about the necessary politics of it, right? Which, again, for those who know, I have my thoughts on that in that regards. But more importantly, from a physician point of view, right, I really wanted to kind of talk about like I asked this question on one of my platforms, right? Like, how is it that people are seeing death that are woefully untrained to deal with death at such a level? Like, how are they dealing with this level of grief, right? And it's so funny. I was just talking to my sister, who is a grief counselor, right? Like, this is what she does. This is her expertise. And she was kind of talking about just this aspect of just a knowledge gap on dealing with death in the general public, not including the knowledge gap of how to deal with death when you're a professional. I could tell you, just kind of start back from my training, right? As an internal medicine resident, one of the first things my attendings told me, right, and really educated me and really honed in on me is that I can do everything right for my patient and still not get the result that I'm looking for, right? And obviously, especially when you're taking care of patients and you're dealing with life or death, which most doctors typically deal with, the result that you're not looking for is death. And I remember kind of going back to the first person I took care of that ended up dying. And it was a nice, lovely old lady. Came in. She had pancreatitis, right, which is acute inflammation of her pancreas. And there's typical ways we take care of patients with pancreatitis. And despite me kind of following, every rule and, crossing every T, dotting every I, when we talk about like how to take care of a patient with acute pancreatitis, at the end, she still didn't make it. And I remember, because again, this was obviously, again, I'm an intern, right? Fresh out of medical school, bright eye, bushy tail. And I remember that this was the first time I was like, man, like I did everything correct and still it wasn't enough. And of course, as when you're a doctor, right, or just any person, right, it hits you a little bit harder because you are like directly. And in fact, I remember I was one of the last people to say goodbye to the patient, right? I was one of the last people to talk to my patient before she ultimately passed away. And it hit me because I was like, wow, like I did everything. And this is when I had the conversation with my attending, right? Like I did everything and it didn't matter. And that's when he kind of educated me, especially when you are in this field of medicine, especially training the way you're training, especially how we train, that, our goal is to, again, not necessarily be perfect, but to do everything that we possibly can for our patient and hope that we get the result that we're looking for. And I talk about how when you're going to the hospital, you are not guaranteed to leave the hospital. Like that is not a guarantee, despite what you may think. You may think, oh, I'm sick. Let me go to the hospital. They take care of me. I come home. It is not a guarantee. I've seen patients, who came in, with infections from pneumonia, infections, skin infection in the bowel. I've seen patients come in with initial concern for constipation. I've seen patients come in with heart attacks. I've seen patients come with strokes, seizures. I've seen patients with a myriad of diseases that came into the hospital for one thing, but ultimately didn't end up not leaving the hospital, right? So, which is why I am so thankful every single time I can get a patient that I take care of that I'm able to send home, right? Like, despite the fact that I've at this, early, point of my career, I probably, again, low ball, have taken care of, in at least tens of thousands of patients, right? I've taken care of a lot of patients over my years. Again, I'm not even, knee deep, right? Like, I'm class of 2014 if we count residency, right? So I'm about 8 years out as an attending physician. But when I count my medical student, when I count my resident years, when I count my years as an attending, I've taken care of quite a few patients. So when I think about the fact that, like, I am joyful that every time I'm able to take care of someone and have a result, it's because I know that that's not guaranteed. But, like, during my trials, my tribulations as a medical student, even as a resident, like, I became hardened. I became hardened to the fact that death was always around me. Death was always around me. And even if death was always around me, like, I always had to be cognizant of what I was doing, because I just knew, again, kind of going back to my attendings motto, if I did everything I was supposed to do, then I have to be able to live with the result that comes to it. So when I fast forward and I think about, like, how I manage, my I guess my inner being, right, when dealing with death, right, how I manage my stress levels when dealing with death. Obviously, we're just coming, off one of the biggest pandemics that will likely, knock on wood, hopefully we'll ever see, right? A lot of us will likely never have to deal with a pandemic again in our lifetime. Again, knock on wood. So and again, I had a video, or, in fact, this week's podcast, I talked about how we crossed the 1 million death mark, right? So I saw a lot of death, right, within that 2-year span because of COVID, right? And that doesn't include the deaths from other issues not associated with COVID. But here I am a trained professional. Like, I go into, I guess I run into battle, right? I go into battle knowing that my success rate is not going to be 100%. I am not going to save everyone. And, like, I'm okay with that, right? I can deal with that. I can come home after not having such a great day, and maybe one of my patients, passes away. Maybe 2 of my patients pass away, sometimes 3. Sometimes it's a crazy day, especially in acute care setting. I can come away from that, but still detach myself, be able to, be the father that I am, the husband that I am, the brother that I am, the cousin. Like, I'm still able to do all those things despite the fact that, death is essentially my 9 to 5. So when I fast forward and I think about the fact that, again, here in the year 2022, we are a little bit over 200. Actually, not even. I think it's not even a little over, right? In the year 2022, we've gotten over 200 mass killings, right? Like, mass shootings have occurred over 200 times, right, in our short span of a time frame within this year. And I think about, like, how, like, you have 21 families, right, that are forever affected directly. And then when you think about all of the families that are indirectly affected because they knew those families. And then when you think about all the people who are affected because they knew the families who knew the families. And then here I'm in South Florida, and still I'm affected by the fact that, and I was talking to someone, like, this week, especially in South Florida, is the last week of school. Like, earlier this week, I was able to spend time, with family. I was able to spend time at my kids' school. They had a little field day, had a great time with both my twins as well as my oldest daughter. Great time. And we were gearing up. There was a talent show. We were gearing up because it was the final week of school. And I can't even imagine the process of thinking, like, wow, at the end of the week, we have to get ready for the summer. We have to do summer related activities. And now 21 plus families are having to deal with funerals because of a mass killing. Like, how does one who thought that, like, the worst thing I was going to have to do this weekend was wondering if I was going to have to take my kids for swimming lessons, if I was going to take them to, another relative's house for the summer, like, what was I going to do during the summer to keep them busy? And now they're planning funerals. imagine you're in Buffalo and you're saying like, oh, I just need some milk. I just need this. I just need that for a quick grocery run. And I get a phone call that my mom, my dad, my grandma, my grandpa, a relative of mine is not coming home anymore because all they did was grocery shop. And here comes someone with clear, racist, foundations and N-word over their gun and all, like just clear intentions to hurt someone just because of the color of their skin. They're not able to come home. Like, how does those 10 families and the people who know those 10 families deal with that level of death, right? That is something that I can't even imagine dealing with. And I am trained to deal with death. Like, I'm trained, like, this is what I do. I go to work knowing that someone I'm taking care of this morning may not make it this evening. I'm 100% okay with that. I'm able to go. Like, and I asked this, it's so funny because of course, I have a great camaraderie with a lot of my patients, right? So of course, the next day, especially after this most recent shooting, I'm talking to one of my patients and she's like, Dr. Pierre, like, how does this keep happening? So here you are again. She is deeply, she's a religious patient as well too. So of course I knew that I hit her more, right? Like, how does this keep happening, right? Like I could see that she was stressed just because of what occurred. She was stressed of all of these events, right? We already know, I already talked about this, right? And when it comes to medicine, right, your mental has to be there to get you better, right? So now she has taken personal burden of stress on her because she's just empathetic to the situation. She doesn't know how to turn it off. She doesn't know how to turn it on. She does not know how to wall it off as far as the level of stress that's kind of pouring in on her from all different directions. And this is all because she just happens to be an empathetic person. So the plea that I asked myself, and I was just thinking, right, and that's why I wanted to do this week's Real Physician Reacts on it, right? Like, what are you guys actually doing, right? Like, what is actually working for you, right? Like, I know people talk now about how seeing a counselor is like this fad and mental health is a fad. Like, people, I know that crazy talk. And you guys know how I feel. Like, I'm team mental health 100%. Like, and I'm talking to my sister because, again, she does with grief. This is what she does all day, every day. In fact, I'll put her information in the show notes, right? Like, how is it that the lay person is going to, and how is it that the lay person is just able to sleep at night after realizing that 19 kids and 2 teachers, right, can't come home because they got murdered, right? Like, how is it that the lay person is going to deal with the fact that 10 people who just went shopping, like, maybe they want to go get some milk, they want to go get some cheese, they want to go get some to fix dinner, like, is not coming home no more, right? How are their families able to deal with that, right? Like, this is a burden that it's going to have everlasting effects, not only on the people directly affected, but the people who are like in close proximity. But even if you're not in close proximity, the people who are, like, again, thousands of miles away. Like I said, I have no connection with anybody in Buffalo. I have no connection with anybody in Texas. And, we had someone in South California, running in the church and shoot. Like, I have no connection with these people, but the only connection I have is that because I'm empathetic to what they are possibly experiencing, right? Like, it still hits me, right, just as much. But, like, if you're untrained, right, and I've talked about this, how one of the biggest burdens, especially I see sometimes within families, is that you may have that one family member who kind of serves as the family counselor. Like, you guys maybe remember, this was an old podcast episode. Old podcast episode that I did a long time ago, where I say, don't be the family counselor, right? Because if you are not trained to deal with that stress, that burden, right, it will eat you alive. It just has to. And here we are getting to the point within this country that I think a lot of us our way of dealing with the deaths around us that won't even affect us directly is that we're just kind of shutting off. We're just like, wow, another killing. Oh, let me just wait, right? Because something else will likely happen, right? And that's probably the more scarier thing, right? Like, again, at the time I'm recording this, right? This is what's today's date? Today is the 26th. Yeah, today's the 26th, right? Like, if someone catches this like next month in June, a couple months in July, sometime in December, if you're watching this in December, like, this is going to seem so outdated, because the likelihood that another mass killing, another mass shooting, something that's so tragic that takes people's lives away in an area that you wouldn't expect lives to be taken away, the likelihood of that occurring again is so high that we have just kind of, okay, yeah, it's going to happen again. Like, and I've seen some of the discourse, right, from people saying like, well, this is the United States, we just have to deal with this. I saw someone say we just have to deal with it, right? Like, imagine, right, living in a world, especially when you're, again, and I'm owning it right now. I'm not necessarily, I usually talk to my docs with these series, right? I'm not even talking to my doctors, right? I'm talking to you, right, Mr. or Mrs. Layman, right, who have, y'all have no training in this. Y'all shouldn't, right? But like, y'all have no proper training on how to deal with these feelings, right? And maybe you're not seeing a therapist right now. You're not seeing someone who you can talk to these, and you're definitely not bombarding some random family member and putting that stress on them, right? Y'all don't know how to deal with what's going on here. So you have to kind of make up a scenario, right? You have to kind of make up a wall where you say like, oh, this is just how this country is. Nothing's going to happen. Like, we know what happened since Sandy Hook and Columbine and all of the things that seem that we know what's happened since then. So we have to tell ourselves, again, this is when I talk about some kind of coping mechanisms that I see happening, right? We have people saying like, oh, it's going to happen again. So like, I can't get too down on this one right here, because next month something else is going to happen, right? And I can't, get downtrodden on this issue that happened in Buffalo, right? Because something's gonna happen in a different state, in a different, part of time, right? And that is extremely frightening, especially because I know for the majority of us, we either don't have the access to the mental health counseling and the grief counseling that we're going to need, or we just assume that it's not going to work, right? We would just assume that it doesn't matter. And I can tell you, again, my attending from back in the day when he was educating me, again, obviously this wasn't a one-off conversation, because this is something I had to kind of deal with. I remember just saying like, yep, this is just what I had to do, right? And when I think about a full circle moment, I didn't remember, like, this was happened when I was an intern. I didn't remember when I was a second or third year resident, and I had a patient, right, who again was sick, ended up dying, but I had a medical student with me, and it was the medical student's first time seeing death, right? It was the medical student's first time seeing someone that they had been taken care of pass away, and that medical student was absolutely distraught. But what was crazy, and really not, but like, unfortunately, that's kind of how it was done. What was crazy is that, like, when you looked at all of the docs, the respiratory therapists, the other nurses who were there, they're like, okay, call the time. It's 1:30. Okay, all right, time of death 1:30. All right, see y'all guys later. It was just like, all right, yep, this is how we do it. This is what occurs. And then it wasn't until I turned around and I looked at the student and I was like, oh, like, that ain't a normal reaction, y'all. Like, it's not normal for us to act like this just happens and we should just go about our day, get to our lunch, go see our other patient we haven't seen. Like, that's actually not normal. So I always thank that medical student. Again, I think I wrote a blog on it, right? Not especially on my blog writing days, right? Like, I remember seeing that student, seeing her face, and then it hit me like, oh my God, I remember when that was me, right? I remember when my first death hit me the way like it hit her. So what I do, and when I'm hoping to plead for, the Lunch and Learn community and those who come across this video, right? Whether you see it on my Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube, or you watch it, what I'm hoping is that you don't become that person that act like this is just like, oh, this is just how it's supposed to happen, right? Like, don't fool yourself and not think that this is affecting you just because you're able to push it to the back burner. Like, don't fool yourself in thinking that seeing 21 people die, at an elementary school, 10 people die in a supermarket, one person die in a church, and more and more and more. Don't fool yourself in thinking that, like, oh, we just kind of have to deal with it. And, I'm not going to stress myself. There's nothing I can do, right? Because I'm pretty sure the 10 people in Buffalo never thought it could happen to them in Buffalo. I'm pretty sure the 21 families in Uvalde, Texas, never thought it could happen in Uvalde. Like, I'm pretty sure that was a thought process that a lot of them have, right? And because they might have had that, they may have been less empathetic when it happened in Buffalo, right? Because you don't think it can happen where you're at, you may be less empathetic that is happening in Uvalde, Texas, right? But like, it can come to your front door at any time, right? Like, we just is what it is, right? Like, I just plead you guys that like you are not dealing with death as good as you may think you're dealing with death, right? And so if I can just leave with some parting words today, I just encourage, everyone to like find someone, reputable, someone that, that they can lean on, they can talk to. Obviously, I'm always stressing about my health professional, especially shout out to my mental health professional, shout out to my grief counselors out here. I surely stress, like, find someone, right? Because again, even if it doesn't affect you personally, even if you're able to now turn off your empathetic switch because you're like, man, if I let that stress, what happens in Buffalo to me, then I have to let the stress of what happens in the 200 other, like, if I let a little in, I have to let it all in, and I don't want to let it all in. Find a way to be able to cope in a healthy manner, because again, that this is a stressor that I think is going to affect people like probably for the rest of their lives, right? Like, if you knew those 10 patrons who got murdered in Buffalo, and especially if you're close and intimate with them, like, what happened to them is going to affect you for the rest of your life. If you knew those 21 people, if you knew those 21 families, if you knew those 19 kids out of those 21 families, right? And you think that this incident is not going to affect you for the rest of his lives, you got to be kidding. If you think those elementary students who had to hide in their classroom, if you think about those teachers who had to protect those children are not going to be thinking about this for the rest of their lives, you have another thing coming, right? Like, again, you guys do not deal with death as well as you think you do, right? And I'm just here to tell it, right? Like, it just is what it is. Like, again, I don't care how hardened you may think you are. You guys are not dealing with a lot of these deaths as much as you think you do. And why would you be able to? Because you've never been trained to. Right. So again, I am yours truly, Dr. Pierre. Again, I hate to, especially at a time like this, but unfortunately, especially in this country, a time like this seems to happen a lot more frequently than we ever would want it. Right. Like, again, yours truly, Dr. Pierre. Again, thank you for joining another episode of Real Physician Reacts. I'm going to see you guys next week.